the contract negotiations. Uli also instituted ST&HV's first online submission system, and as of next month, in addition to moving on to SAGE's online system, it'll also, all papers that are fully accepted will be available online and count as published. It's called Publishing Before Print, which is a great boon to anyone who needs papers fully published for promotion and tenure purposes. And also just that your paper comes out and people can see it in its published form 2 years before it actually sees print. There's still a backlog. Those of us who served on council will always remember Uli's amazing reports full of graphs. This year was in color and 3D, fitting for a discipline obsessed with ways of knowing and citation politics. These sliced and diced the journal according to roles of submission and rejection, as well as gender, nationality, authorship practices, reviewer responsibility. Balancing all of these is never easy, and the bottom line is Uli constantly reminded us, do your reviews when you're asked. You know who you are. Everyone. Well, this review of Uli is done. She's handed over the editorship to Lee Starr and Jeff Barker in July. For all of this work, Uli, for the 5 years, 450 papers processed, long negotiations, and many headaches, we give you a plaque.
Thank you very much to all of you who have submitted papers, waited patiently, written reviews. I would like particularly to thank our contributing editors who really, they complain sometimes because they always say, I will just get those who are difficult ones. Yeah, that's the job, I said. You took it on, that's your fault. In fact, I'm quite happy to hand it on to Lee and Geoff. I know the journal is in good hands, and I'm quite happy to be able to hand it over in good shape, and I hope it enjoys further on the life the community is growing. That's beautiful always to see, although it was a lot of work. I was sometimes desperate. Wes was always there when I had to moan about people. And the chairs of the publication committee did so too, and so I got a lot of support without which I couldn't have done the work. So I enjoyed, and thank you very much to you also.
Many thanks. We'll keep on going. A couple of quick announcements about, I guess you could call this births. We have joining us in the community 2 new aspects of STS around the world. One is the birth of the East Asian Science, Technology and Society Journal, based in Taiwan and co-edited by editorial boards in Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and OEA. OEA is outside East Asia. Intel has the practice of talking about the America and the technologized West, and then ROW, which is the rest of the world. I don't think it's in that spirit exactly. I'm very happy to welcome that journal to our community, and it will be published in English with abstracts in these other languages as well, and I think is a wonderful chance to make more bridges and exchange more ways of knowing between each other. So I very much welcome you and urge you to go to the web and look at the website and think about contributing. And I won't think of you as a rival in the affections of ST&HV, but rather a collaborator. I also want to mention something I forgot to mention last year, which is the birth of STS Italia, which was born the year before last. It's had its second meeting. The president is Alessandro Mongi, and there will continue to be yearly meetings, I hope. And one result of that is I'm teaching grounded theory in Sardinia in December, which I didn't expect to be doing 5 years ago. It's There's wonderful other kinds of bridges being built there. Now we move on to the most pleasant part of the evening for me, which is the awards section of the banquet. Always just such a pleasure and joy. Our first presentation will be for the Nicholas Mullins Award, which is the award for the best student paper in the field of STS, and that will be presented by Maureen McNeil.
Yes. Thank you very much, Lee. It's my pleasure to present this award, which, as most of you will know, is the prize that's given for the best nominated essay or piece of work by, depending on where you're located, a graduate student or a postgraduate student. The designation differs. And it's my pleasure to say that the committee for this award, we had a very difficult time because of the quality of the submission actually deciding on the prize winner. And I think that's not to detract from the achievement of the prize winner, but to indicate and to encourage all of you to make sure that your students and you yourself, if you are a graduate or postgraduate student, do continue to keep that quality of competition going. And appropriately enough, the title of this year's essay was Competition in the Wild, Emerging Figuration of Healthcare Markets. And the piece of work was a very accomplished theoretical piece which engaged very critically with Michel Calon's work on the performativity of economics and economic markets, and also engaged with a range of other STS literature and scholarship and theoretical frameworks. But it also did so while combining that with research which was action-based and interventionist research. So we thought that this was a particularly unique kind of accomplishment. And the winner of the award, and I hope I get this right because I've been practicing all day, is Chun Zuderant Gerak. My congratulations. And I should also say that all of you will have the opportunity to read a revised version of this essay because it's going to appear in Social Studies of Science. So, congratulations very much.
Okay, many thanks. It's a real honor to get this prize from this society, which I consider so very much to be my intellectual home, my academic home. And on behalf of the organizing committee of next year, I just want to express the hope that I see many of you next year in Rotterdam. Looking forward.
Our next prize is very appropriately this year awarded on the centenary of Rachel Carson's birth, which has been being celebrated in various ways in the media that I listen to, National Public Radio and various websites on ecology. I think it's very appropriate that we have this award, and especially so this year, of course. The award will be presented by Sergio Sismondo.
The Carson Prize goes to a book that the Carson Committee deems, first of all, to be excellent, but also to have an interventionist, if I can pick up on Maureen's word, element to it as well. On behalf of the Rachel Carson Committee, I'm pleased to award this year's Carson Prize to Karis Thompson for her book, Making Parents, the Ontological Choreography of Reproductive Technologies. In this beautifully written book, Thompson tells us how people become parents as a result of careful work in the clinic. As Thompson is quick to point out, assisted reproductive technologies seem miraculous, But the miracles are performed through much mundane work, work that integrates political, social, legal, ethical, bureaucratic, medical, technical, and quintessentially personal domains. This integration affects ontological choreography. Thompson's loving ethnography of the biomedical mode of reproduction explores and analyzes this ontological choreography. There will be an author meets critic session on the book tomorrow at 1:45, and whether or not you can make that panel, I encourage you all to read Making Parents. Karis?
Good evening. I'm feeling very shy, so let me quickly say something. First of all, to thank the committee for reading such a clunky book generously, which you obviously did. I'd also like to, so many people in this room and in this field are amazing interlocutors and examples and so on and so forth. So I want to make sure that I mention the people on my committee and a couple of extra people who might as well be on my committee. Mike Lynch, Adele Clark, Jerry Doppel, Donna Haraway, Steve Shapin, Sheila Jasnoff, Martha Lamplin, and Chandra Mukherjee. All the feminist SCS crowd and all my buddies and students. I just wanted to say one quick other thing, and I didn't know I was supposed to have to say anything, so I didn't prepare anything, and I was sitting at my seat thinking, what on earth can I say? I ought to say something that's uplifting. And all that was going through my head was all the miserable things, the low points of doing my various ethnographic work. So first of all, I was thinking about being chased by a hippo in Kenya, or the time when I was assigned to be the person who had to run to the microscope in male infertility surgery and see if any of the sperm were still alive, which was pretty low. But I think the worst time of all of ethnographic moments for me was the first time I ever watched a surgery where they did it's a hysterectomy where they pull the uterus out down through the cervix. And at the point at which they had cut the uterus off from the vagina, the doctor stopped in the middle of the surgery and asked the nurses whether or not it was worth leaving the woman under the knife with any vagina. And it turned out that this conversation was about whether or not she was still likely to have an active sex life, which then turned out to be all about how old she was, her ethnicity, her income level, and a speculation about what her likely need for future sexual activity might be. That was, I think, the moment of absolute lowness in my ethnographic career. I don't know why I said that. Thank you very much.
Fortunately for us, those low points become points of rage and fire and translate into words that change the world. So I thank you for undergoing those things, Karis, and reminding us of those moments that we all have shared. The next prize, I probably shouldn't say anything about. I wasn't on the committee, but I'm very, very pleased to be able to award a prize in honor of Ludwig Fleck, who has been in so many ways the progenitor of ideas for our field, also of ideals, as someone who turned his own low point, his incarceration, into a way of thinking about the world that infected, in a good way, much of what we're about. And in sort of as an obligatory point of passage, reading Fleck, I think, is something that most of us share and has, in its way, inspired a fire in all of us. The Ludwig Fleck Prize will be presented by Anne Jordenberg.
How is a book memory? And how is a book prize memory? We may even ask, how is a 4S Banquet memory? To answer these questions, and also to appreciate why they are important questions, we now have Jeff Boker's book, Memory Practices in the Sciences. This book is the winner of the 2007 Ludwig Fleck Prize for the best book in the area of science and technology studies. I read this book as an invitation to explore a myriad of practices in which we participate as knowledge producers, scientific as well as other. Boker explores memory practices in the scientific fields of geology in the 1830s, in cybernetics in the 1960s, and environmental sciences or biodiversity in what we call the new millennium, the 2000s. He writes about the personal as political, about information systems, a wide variety of inscription devices. He writes about religion, about friendship, about books, about databases, about dreams, etc., etc. So many topics and a time span of 200 years. Isn't this a lot? There's a very simple answer to that. Yes, it is a lot. And that's exactly why this book won this year's Fleck Prize. Let me be slightly more specific and point to 3 aspects of the book that made it stand out in the heap of books the prize committee was reading. First, it is the way it presents its various topics, how it is doing memory. In other words, its intriguing methodology or its storytelling practices. Drawing on an abundance of materials, all kinds of sources imaginable, Boker tells the story of how information technologies, new and old information technologies in a very wide sense, contribute to shaping our knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. He raises many questions, and it must be said that it does not exactly answer all of them. But we learn to appreciate this as we dip and weave our way in his book, following him around in ever-widening circles. Secondly, the book is also a valuable contribution to the understanding of science as practice. In SDS, of course, we all know that science is practice. Yet Boker's focus on archives as a spatial dimension, a place of memory practices, and his focus on epochs of memory as a temporal dimension adds a new twist to our understanding. He gives us 2 new sides or concepts to think with, and that is exactly what good books should provide. Thirdly, it's a daring project to draw together 3 seemingly very different scientific fields, geology, cybernetics, and biodiversity, and add a time span of 200 years to this mixture. Not many SDSs dare to do that today, happy as we are with our case stories, making sure no one will ever catch us generalizing. Not that Boker does that in any conventional sense, and I should hurry to add, his book is not a linear story, nor linear history. And also let me add a 4th, more personal note here. Some of my significant others laughed when I told them I was going to comment on a book dealing with memory. I suspect they would say that would be the least able person to talk about anything that has to do with memory. But after having read Jeff's book, I know they are wrong. Because memory is not something you either have or do not have. Memory is practice, and very significant practices as such. And to my pleasure, Boker also insists that there is no such thing as perfect memory. So let me conclude by sharing with you one quote from the book, the final sentence, and also perhaps the shortest sentence in the whole book, which reads, quote, "Only an open past can unlock the present and free the future," unquote. Thank you, Jeff, for writing this book, and congratulations. And now you will have two things, money and something beautiful to hang on the wall.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. I really don't know what to say after that. Je vais commencer en français. Nous sommes dans un Québec pas encore libre. Mais sans mes amis français francophones, je ne serais pas ici ce soir. C'est à cause de mon amitié avec Bruno Latour, avec Michel Serres, que je suis ici. Ce sont leurs problèmes que j'explore avec mon travail. Et je vous remercie tous pour votre influence et pour le plaisir de votre compagnie. So, merci. Let me now move into English. And as I move into English, I'm going to go into sales mode. Let me tell you why you should read my book. So, I went into Amazon statistics today, and I found out that I have 30.4 words per sentence. This is better than 96% of books out there in the market. Only 4% have more words per sentence. I have 1.8 syllables per word. Now, unfortunately, there's 24% that have more than that. But then I go into the money factor. The words per dollar. 3,041 words per dollar is the reason you should be reading me. Or if you're into weight, it's 4,807 words per ounce. So I would really encourage you to read this book, if only for its, if only for that basic value. But let me talk a little bit about what's come up in the Author Meets Critics session today, and what I think is really important. It's a question of footnotes. It's a question of, well, why are we here? Who do we recognise? Who do we remember when we talk? When I first came to 4S, and Lee and I talked about this, and several friends talked about this over the last couple of days, one of the great things about coming to the 4S for the first time is that you see your footnotes, walking, talking, they're there. And it's like, who is that person? And you get a sense of the body. And Ellen Bolker gave us this absolutely marvellous talk, about bodies today. And it's about that body. The footnote is more than about what someone writes. It's how do you see that person? How do you understand them in the world? So I think it's one of the great things today, and one of the pleasures in my own life. And this is one of the, frankly, and I'm not going to burst into tears here, it's the greatest honour, and it's the greatest pleasure I've had in my own life. So thank you one and all, to be recognised by such a wonderful community, people that I love and treasure. That means so much to me. But I felt a little bit like Christopher Isherwood, who wrote I'm a Camera. It's like, hey, I'm a footnote. And it's like, I'm delighted to be a footnote, and I thank you for that. But I also want to go the other way. We had a nice session yesterday about the relationship between information studies and STS. And one of the arguments was really nice in scientometrics, was that instead of looking at the backward flow, the people that we refer back to, let's look at the forward flow and the people that we steal from amongst our students. And I see at a table there sitting together, we've got David Rebus and Maria Podolsky. Without them, I wouldn't be here tonight. Without the students that I've worked with, my work would be nowhere near as rich as it is, and I'm not claiming it's too rich. So, I think that it's that sense of community that we build together, and that we've been able to build together as a community, in this generous community of science studies, that I hope I've been able to reflect in my work. Let me finish because Sal brought this up, so it's his fault, Mary Douglas. And I've been accused of kind of too many references and too much wide reading. But let me say, I was blown away by Mary Douglas's last book, which is called Thinking in Circles. I totally recommend it to you. And let me tell you why. It's a book about the Book of Numbers, about Tristram Shandy, about a number of different kinds of literary text. But what she does is she reads these texts in ways that things that were seen as totally stupid, totally weird, astylistic texts, she reads them as being very rich, very readable, and very, very structured in very, very interesting ways. Now that was the great joy for me in Mary Douglas's work throughout her life. It's that ability to read sensibly, read openly, and read, in a sense, Dorothy Smith's term, read in the sense of listening forth. That's what I've really tried to do in my work, and I really appreciate it. You know, I love it if I've been able to succeed in that. So I recommend that book most highly. I am so honored. I'm so delighted. Hey, I love you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Anjun. Our final prize is the Communist Prize, given in the name of J.D. Bernal. And it's a special honor for me tonight to do one thing, which is to have a student of mine who I am extremely grateful to in the way that Jeff spoke of, for teaching me so much. Someone who's finishing her PhD and is something that I've tried to do a bit in my presidency to make sure that just like the big old people aren't the only ones to speak. And in this case especially to reaffirm the link between feminist scholars across times and spaces and life worlds. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sarah Mralik, who will present the Bernal Prize.
Thanks, Thank you. Thanks. One day I hope to do this like Jeff Bowker, but until then, my head will be down. I'll be looking at this paper. It's an honor to share with you this evening the presentation of the John Desmond Bernal Award to Ruth Schwartz Cohen, whose contributions have been pivotal in shaping critical inquiries across the domains of science, technology, and medicine. She's most widely known for her book, More Work for Mother, The Ironies of Household Technology from the Open Hearth to the Microwave. In this book, she calls attention to the assumption that the invention of new technologies for household work actually reduced the amount of time spent doing household work. Ruth Schwartz Cohen exposes the complex socio-technical relationships that are present in what is often considered a simple domain of simple work. She does this by taking into account household gender roles, the development of particular markets, of labor economies, and the social construction of consumerism. Her thesis, however, is not limited to kitchen work. Ruth Cohen's sociocultural investigation of the development of household technologies also demonstrates how social practices operate in the production of the Darwinian notion of technological development, which is to say that the best technology is the technology that we use naturally. Her challenge to this particular notion of technological progress continues in the work, The Social History of American Technology. Here she puts forward a critical account of the development of material culture at a particular moment in the development of a nation, the United States, within the hands of two ideologically opposed communities, natives and settlers. Carrying her investigation through a historiography of artifacts such as corn, birth control, and rockets, she demonstrates the potency of the past, how ingrained practices and ideologies continue to shape ways of understanding technological development and use. It is not all about technology, though. People matter too. Often social networks, power, and markets tend to overshadow the presence of human beings, of the people. In the two previous works mentioned, not only does she talk about people, she trusts the reader with critical self-reflections on her own engagement in the social forces that shape technology adoption. And in her book, with Neil Cowan, Our Parents' Lives, The Americanization of Eastern European Jews, she foregrounds Eastern European immigrants and accounts the ways in which their epistemologies permutated during their processes of cultural assimilation and disassimilation. And I'd like to take this chance to add a more personal note, which is that the reading that first drew me to the methodological benefits of an STS approach was Ruth Cowan's essay, How the Refrigerator Got Its Hum. In this essay, Ruth Cowan examines the constellation of social, political, and market forces that are behind the story of why we choose to consume electric refrigerators over gas refrigerators. This piece opened up for me the possibility of investigating space exploration from the vantage point of technoscientific knowledge production. How is it that we can put a man on the moon, but we can't transform the ways in which we attend to cultural differences and structural disparities that inform design and access to education and work? Ruth Cowan demonstrates a historical approach which respects the multiplicity on which standards of technology are constructed while engaging the social forces that shape production and use. I found this to be an important and necessary standpoint to inhabit when taking up the challenge of questioning technological determinism and space exploration. And in fact, there is a close relationship between the work of Martian science and the work that takes place in the household domain. Ruth Cowan is known as a builder and attender of scholarly society, providing leadership at a number of institutions. These include the History Department and Women's Studies at the State University of New York, Stony Brook, and currently the History and Sociology of Science at the University of Pennsylvania. Also, professional societies which include the History of Science Society, the Society for the History of Technology, and the Social Studies of Science. She's also known for her generous spirit towards her students, which comes across in her 3 decades of mentoring students, as well as inspiring scholars through her writing. This award signifies our appreciation for your work and for your continued devotion to socially unpacking areas of science, technology, and medicine from the family home to biomedical engineering. So if you would please join me in thanking Ruth Schwartz Cowan for her contribution.
It's all right. I had actually prepared remarks, but Sarah, come back, please. I'm going to ditch them because only Lee would have understood how important it was to me to have a graduate student make this introduction. It's really moved me so much that I can't present what I had intended to say. So what I'll say instead is that I hope you will imagine someone standing to my left who's older than I am, if such a thing is possible, and with whom I took my first and only sociology course as an undergraduate, in which I read Bernard Barber's book. The person to my left would be Renee Fox. And just think of the generations of women on this podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's this old saying that actions speak louder than words. It's now my pleasure, privilege, and relief to introduce the new president of 4S to you, an old friend of mine, Mike Lynch, who I first met some years ago when we were called collectively micro-sociologists. And we're invited to be on many panels together under that rubric. Micro meaning, I think, that they thought that we were looking at little things. And since then, over a long joint journey, I think that we found that little things and big things inhabit some of the same spaces. And we've woven around that in different ways in the society over the years. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mike to you. Wonderful, wonderful person to be president. And I thought about what I should pass on to him. So a gavel, I couldn't do that. A baton, I don't know, it seemed a bit phallic or something. So maybe I'll just welcome you with a hug.
It's blue, okay.
Thank you.
Here it is. Okay, I will relieve you of further speeches. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope that you all will come to Rotterdam August 20th to 23rd next year. We will make it a good time. We have at least 25 rooms available so that talks can be longer. We will not have micro talks. We will have talks that last 20, 25 minutes, hopefully, or longer. And we will have projectors for your visuals. What?
Cigars. We got the cigars.
Cigars? We will have cigars for everybody. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we're closed for the meeting. Okay. Enjoy, and see you next year.
I think I'm related.